Welcome to Football Today, teams, profiles, and projections. I'm Bobby Skinner here with Justin Penik, and we are starting this off with the Carolina Panthers. So, since this is the first one, we can kind of talk about our vision for this. We've done this for Talking Giants for 5 years, where we do player profiles and projections. So we're doing teams now that we're doing an NFL show, and we're gonna go kind of like through their stats, what their coaching staff looks like, big picture thoughts, talk about the units, new additions versus guys that were lost, the draft class, and then our X factors, and then our over under with the win totals. Justin, are you excited to talk about this Carolina Panther team?
Dude, I don't know if I'm excited to talk about the Carolina Panther team. You know what? There are some exciting bits about the Carolina Panthers that I want to ask you about and get your insights about. No, but I'm excited to just do this and to dive into all 32 NFL teams. We're releasing this starting on July 22nd, which is a Monday. We will be going every single weekday, Monday through Friday, regardless of what else is going on at the channel, releasing in the morning on YouTube. And then basically we're going to take it up until the start of the NFL season, the week of the start of the NFL season, and we're going to end off with the Kansas City Chiefs. So the rest of the 30 teams, you got to fill out your imagination yourself on who they're going to be.
So we did our power rankings of mine, yours, and Chris Rose's together, and we had the Carolina Panthers 32nd, right? They went 2-15 last year. Offensive stats, they were 32nd in scoring, 32nd in yards per attempt, 30th in EPA. Rushing, they were 20th in total yards, 24th in yards per carry, and then 24th in EPA. And then on the defensive side, there's some bright spots on the defense, but the overall numbers, didn't end up good. Points per game, 29th. Third in yards, 8th in yards per attempt, 17th in EPA as a passing defense. And then rushing, they were 23rd in yards, 12th in yards per carry, and then dead last in EPA, which is crazy to get that. But they bring in Dave Canales as a head coach, his first season, his first year after, one season as the Bucs offensive coordinator and 3 years with the Seahawks as their passing coordinator and QB coach. They bring in Brady Idzik, who was, the Bucs wide receiver coach and was an assistant QB wide receiver coach in Seattle. And then Ajiro Evero stays with the Panthers, second year at the Panthers DC after being a Vic Fangio, Brandon Staley disciple. But it starts with Bryce Young, right? This is a team that traded a haul. They traded away multiple first-round picks and Bryce Young and DJ Moore to go get Bryce Young. And it was an awful year. But you would think that like the first overall pick would have some grace. But I'll be honest, man. Like I want to have some faith in Bryce Young, and I just don't. When you go back and watch what happened, I just don't see this as a guy who totally figures out, right? Like one game over 250 passing yards, 11 fumbles, 10 interceptions. The second worst 20-plus yard completion rate to Mac Jones at 27%. And also with the fifth lowest rate. So it wasn't like he just, was taking shots. The Panthers' second best offensive scoring game was with Andy Dalton at quarterback.
Yeah.
Right? Now, here's the things that Bryce Young has on his side. He was ninth in pressure rate and was running for his life a lot. When you watch, it's like, man, he just had to run for his life. The offensive play design was lacking. It had bad outlets and was just bad at putting like defenders in conflict. And they basically had to live off of like quick game with Adam Thielen and RPOs, and no one really could separate on their own. So I think Deontay Johnson can be a huge add to them. Dave Canales should be an upgrade. But I worry that Bryce Young's not it, right? Like I think his accuracy tails off when he's pushing the ball down the field without having like the great arm talent to make up for it. Like he tries to create too much with his size and his talent. It's just never going to be a great creator to me.
He did that. He tried creating too much in college, and he wasn't even that great at doing it.
Yeah, and that was on Alabama. And there's just times where like he doesn't let things develop and would look for Adam Thielen as a safety blanket, and he was like kind of easily baited by like trap corners, like he's probably a fun guy to game plan for a defense coordinator because it's like he falls for like these kind of like tricks and disguised coverages. So I Bryce Young should improve this year.
Right, but let me give you the other side of it here. Where last year, I mean, the Carolina Panthers had like a bottom roster in the NFL last year, even with Brian Burns and some guys defensively. But especially on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line was really, really bad. Adam Thielen, who we viewed as washed, was the team's leading receiver last year with 103 catches. Next on the list was Jonathan Mingo with 43, and then you had a running back, Chuba Hubbard with 39. So really, like there is no Adam Thielen isn't anything close to a wide receiver one, and then you had no semblance of a wide receiver two with a bad offensive line, with a Miles Sanders that you really overpaid, and then you're relying on Chuba Hubbard. So it wasn't a great, not even a great, it was a bad offensive situation with bad coaching. Now you have a new GM that comes in here. So, like, my main question to you is the talent offensively enough for this to be a true evaluation year for Bryce Young or a second year where he is destined to fail? Separate Bryce Young's ability away from this for a second.
I think it's enough to get a decent idea, right?
And I agree with that.
It's not a great, like, Deontay Johnson should help out a lot. Like, one of my notes is Deontay Johnson should help out a lot or show the weaknesses in Bryce Young's game, right? Deontay Johnson is someone who can separate on every single route on the route tree at all three levels of the field. And, you add Xavier Legette. Like, can Legette or Mingo bring some explosivity to this offense? You still have Adam Thielen there. And I think Dave Canales is going to be a solid, play designer for them. And they look to upgrade the offensive line with the guards. I still have questions of how good they're going to be pass protection wise, but it should be enough to get an idea, right? And I just that is why I have them low. Is because I just don't have faith in Bryce Young as a quarterback. And like you said, this is a better situation, but it's certainly not a good situation offensively.
No. I do think they have the potential to be a decent pass blocking unit. I don't know. I don't know about running the ball, but they added two guards, Damian Lewis from Seattle, and then Robert Hunt, who they paid a lot of money from the Miami Dolphins, and then Taylor Moton, who I view as a pretty good right tackle. Taylor Moton didn't allow a sack last year, only allowed one QB hit. So I view especially the right side of that line as that could be a pretty damn good right side of the line. Center is kind of iffy. And then you have a Kemikwanu, who I kind of want you to, that was your guy a couple years ago during that, the 2022 draft. A Kemikwanu year 3 breakout could at least make this Carolina Panther offensive line. And that's a great way to kind of start off a rebuild, with Dan Morgan as the first year GM. That could be a great way to start off a rebuild and a team that needs some sort of semblance and direction. If you can have an offensive line that can have a good core of Moton, Hunt, Damian Lewis, a Kemikwanu, you figure out center later. Talk to me about a Kemikwanu year 3 going in.
Well, I have some specific talking points for him for a certain segment we're doing at the end of the show.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah.
You know what? We don't have to go. This doesn't have to be perfect. Like our X Factor segment. It's a Kemikwanu for me, right?
Okay.
Because they, like you said, they added Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis to that interior. That should help. But I don't think we're viewing either of those guys as like, top guards in the game, even though they both got paid very handsomely by the Carolina Panthers. If you can protect his blind side and have him feel comfortable, because he didn't look comfortable last year, right? Like I said, he didn't let things develop, and he would just kind of like, all right, let me find Adam Thielen, who's not someone who's going to separate, in the intermediate or deep game anymore. And didn't have that guy who you just trust to separate. So if a Kemikwanu can improve, right? And I thought he would really, like, he looked better at the end of year 1. They were a very run heavy offense, and that leaned to his strengths. And he struggled last year. So, but I don't view Kemikwanu as someone like, oh, physically he doesn't have. He just has to clean up technique and stuff. And he's someone that I view as someone who could have a year 3 breakout in the NFL, right? And not just, picking someone on the Panthers to have a year 3 breakout. When you ask me just like, hey, who's some breakout candidates in the NFL, I think a Kemikwanu can be that, and that can give you at least some ability to run a functioning offense, right? You add Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen can still, handle that slot duties and be a comfort blanket. And then hopefully you can get something out of Legette or Mingo to create some big plays. It's just, when you watch the Bryce Young film, it isn't just the situation. It isn't just a situation, right? Like, there is inaccuracy pushing the ball down the field. Like, the ball does not have the zip that you would expect from a first overall pick when you're having to push the ball in the tight windows. Like I think of the Lions got an interception on him where, like, the corner just baited him easily, and he just doesn't, like, stronger arm quarterbacks make that throw, and he ends up turning into an interception. And just, there's just so much reliance on creation, which part of was because of the offensive line, and I just don't think he's ever going to be great in that area at that size and with that arm talent. And he's not the he's a good athlete, but he's not someone that's threatening to rush for 70 to 100
No,
yards in a game.
no, not at all. And one of the things that really bothered me about the Panthers, looking at some data and looking at their personnel grouping frequency last year, they ran 88% out of 11 personnel and 12% in 12 personnel in 2023. Now, Canales like to mix it up at least a little bit more. Canales was 72% 11 personnel, 24% in 12 personnel. But I'll tell you what, Bobby.
I don't think they have the personnel to do that, though, right?
Exactly. That's my exact point. Tommy Tremble, who I liked from Notre Dame. I really thought that maybe he could have been a better blocker. I don't think he's that great of a blocker.
He's more of like a gadget if you're using him as a blocker as moving in space, and Jatavion Sanders is not that at all.
No. So I mean, if we're running 12 personnel with Tommy Tremble and Jatavion Sanders, that's not a formation that as a defense that if the offense is calling a run play, I'm salivating at the potential of the ball could be going in that direction, and those two guys are blowing it up. So still, like, it's so important in the NFL to have diversity with your personnel and like things that you can do differently. And there's a lot of data that shows if you can run 3, 4, 5 different personnel grouping frequencies in a given game, it actually increases your chances of winning. But you kind of have to have the personnel to do that. And you need to have the guys that can block, the guys that can line out wide and shit like that. And the Panthers just don't have that right now. And I think that hurts Bryce Young because if you're asking, it hurts Bryce Young and it hurts the offensive line, where if you're asking these guys to spread out wide, then it's Bryce Young has to kind of manage that offense. And especially if you can't run the ball and go under center and make things easier with 12 personnel and kind of just move guys at will and your tight ends being part of that effort, again, it's just going to make things harder on the quarterback. And I think this year needs to be, how can we make things easier on Bryce Young, not harder?
And it'll be interesting to see if they can run the ball, right? Last year was really bad. And you add Dave Canales, who does like to run the ball, but
not successfully in Tampa Bay.
It was really bad with the Bucs, right? They had the worst yards per carry in the NFL. Now, Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis should help there. Kim Ekwonu can be good as a run blocker. But then, like, the running back room just doesn't inspire any confidence. You have Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and then Jonathan Brooks. And I don't care if you're the biggest fan of Jonathan Brooks. Like, that first year off of a torn ACL for running backs, like, it's almost exclusively a down year unless you're, Dalvin Cook or Adrian Peterson. And again, you drafted Jonathan Brooks in the second round, right? It's the second round after trading up to go get Xavier Legette in the last pick of the first round. That I just don't have faith that this offense is going to be even close to average.
No,
and I think a big part of that has to do with my lack of faith in Bryce Young.
Right now, it could be if this running game can sustain itself on early downs and help Bryce Young and avoid 3rd and long. It could be, but I just don't have that belief. The best thing for the Carolina Panthers to walk out of this year is obviously, best case scenario, Bryce Young's the quarterback of the future and we believe in him. But I think one of the best things offensively and the most realistic option is they walk away from 2024 saying, damn, we have an offensive line that we can move forward with. And if you walk away saying that, then number one, I think you're winning some football games. But then also number two, that's a great start to a rebuild, like I said earlier. You want to move to the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah. So the defense last year actually had pretty good efficiency numbers, but they couldn't get turnovers. They were 32nd in turnover rate. They had 8 interceptions and 3 fumble recoveries, which was the worst turnover rate in the NFL at 5.5%. But like you look, they were 3rd in passing yards per attempt, 12th in rushing yards per carry, but 29th in points per game. So they keep Ajero Evero as the defensive coordinator, who kind of comes from the bend, don't break school while disguising coverages, but he does blitz a decent amount. I'm interested to see how this defense performs this year, right? Like on the front, you have Derek Brown, who was 1st in run stops in the NFL last year. They signed Ashawn Robinson from the Giants, who was 3rd in total run stops, and he was 2nd in rate. Derek Brown was 5th in run stop rate. Then you get a two-way player like Jadeveon Clowney coming off in a career year. It'll be interesting to see how Shaq Thomas comes off of the injury with Josie Jewell being added. But they are a team that should stop the run.
Yeah, and even DJ Wonnum from Minnesota. I know we're talking about stopping the run right now, but he's even a guy that's gotten sacks consistently. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Uh, Brian Burns traded away, the biggest loss for the Carolina Panthers this offseason. How much of an impact do you think that's going to have on the defense?
I just Ashawn Robinson's not a pass rusher. Um,
No, their offseason was we're going to add beef. Like we're going to add front seven and front five up front. That was the
I don't think you can
offseason goal.
expect Clowney to have match the same production as him last year.
No, but I think Clowney's a better run defender though.
Yeah, and Derek Brown's going to give you good pass rush production. Even stuff like they lost Frankie Louvu, who's one of the best blitzing pass rushing linebackers. So I don't see this as a team that's going to get after the pass rusher a ton, but I think they're going to just try and play coverage on the back end and stop the run up front, right? Like I think that's going to be the focus of this defense. Now they're not going to stack the boxes a ton, but I think they're going to do that. But I think it really, this defense depends on the back end. While you have a good group up front, but it's not a great pass rushing group. I think that they feel confident in their secondary, right? Xavier Woods at safety was really good for them last year. Jordan Fuller is a better fit than Jeremy Chin for this Evero defense. And then to me, I picked Ikem Ekwonu for my X Factor. The other one was going to be JC Horn's health, because he's a baller when he's healthy, but he misses he misses too much damn time. But when he's healthy, he is a certified baller. But it's like you can't really count on his health at this point.
No, Bobby, like I kind of had like the X factor for the Panthers before I texted you and I asked you, are we going to kind of stick to, like, is our X factor going to be like a theme, or is it going to be a specific player? We landed on specific player. But before I wrote down, like, the last 4 first round picks for the Carolina Panthers, honestly, as a whole team, that is their X factor. Now it's like, oh yeah, no shit, Sherlock. You want your first round picks to perform well, but Xavier Legette, if you're actually, if you're more than just your final year breakout, that could be huge for the Carolina Panthers. Bryce Young, if you're serviceable, that could be huge for the Carolina Panthers. Ekwonu, we already talked about him. He was your factor, but I'll land on JC Horn. If I had to pick one player as an X factor, it is JC Horn, because if you can have a cornerback that locks down wide receiver ones, is healthy, is reliable, can make plays on the football, I think it could change a defense. You see how the elite corners in the NFL, how they do change their defenses, and especially if you can get a guy that you can draft one and then keep him in-house, but he's got to stay healthy. I think that could change the trajectory of that defense. Because I think without JC Horn, like I think the secondary is okay, but I think the corners are going to struggle. And if the offense, especially if your offense is going to struggle and not score points, and you're going to give the other team a lot of opportunities to get back on the field and have offensive possessions, and they're going to hold the ball, win the time of possession game, I think the secondary could really, really struggle. But if JC Horn is that dude, will go a huge, long way for them.
So free agent additions and losses. On the additions, they added Deontay Johnson, Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, Ashawn Robinson, Jadeveon Clowney, Josie Jewell, Dane Jackson, and Jordan Fuller. They lost Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu, Jeremy Chin, Von Bell, Yetur Gross-Motos, and Deion Jones. What are the ones? I guess we didn't talk about like the move of Brian Burns specifically.
Yeah,
we cover the Giants full time. And I actually have a point that like this could not work out when we talk about the New York Giants in a few episodes. But from the Carolina Panthers point of view, I don't get it, right? Like Brian Burns is not a perfect player, right? He's inconsistent. There's times where he goes quiet. But for a team that is in so dire need of talent, to trade him for a 2nd and a 5th round pick, right? And with the sting of what was offered years before by the Rams, I just don't understand it for a team that signed 2 guys like at the end of their career, close to the end of their career, and Jadeveon Clowney and Ashawn Robinson. Like, why wouldn't it, even if you think that those 2 guys makes this team better for this year, and then you get the 2nd and the 5th round pick, I think Brian Burns is better than some of those parts. And again, I'm not the biggest Brian Burns fan, compared to the best edges in the NFL. But I just don't think the sum of those parts is greater than Brian Burns long term for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I mean, they could have kept his contract really. The Panthers are surprisingly in a really bad cap situation right now. They only have one player making more than $10.1 million, and that's Taylor Moton with $29 million as his cap hit. But they have $46 million in dead cap this year, where Von Bell and Hayden Hurst and Dante Jackson each have like a dead cap of like over $9 million. But I mean, 2026, they're in a great cap space. So they could have structured that Brian Burns deal to make it work and make it fit and backload it like all NFL teams do with all these contracts. Yeah, man. Especially the whole
and you didn't have to sacrifice the offensive line signings, right? What you could have sacrificed is like the Clowney and Ashawn Robinson signings.
They could have got. I think they could have got Ashawn done, but I think we'll just use Jadeveon Clowney as the example here. The crazy part about that process, and I do want to get to their draft class. The crazy thing about that process is Dan Morgan. You know, we see this on Hard Knocks, the Giants offseason Hard Knocks, where Dan Morgan is talking with Joe Shane, where they initially were looking for 2 1s. Because wasn't that the initial Los Angeles Rams offer?
Yeah, obviously they weren't going to get that.
Okay, you weren't going to get 2
You would
months.
have thought if Brian Burns got traded, it would be a first-round pick. There'd be a first-round pick involved in that.
And then there was even talk of, in that conversation at the Senior Bowl with Dan Morgan, Joe Shane, and Brandon Bean, 2 2s. And that didn't even happen. Didn't even happen at all.
Yeah, just a bad return for Brian Burns. Like, if you want to move off him, fine, but that was a bad return. Their draft class, they traded up in the first round, got Xavier Legette, Jonathan Brooks coming off the torn ACL in the second round, linebacker out of Kentucky, Trevin Wallace in the third round, Jatavion Sanders in the fourth round, the athletic tight end of Texas, Shao Smith-Wade, a cornerback out of Washington State in the fifth round. We would have been happy covering this draft, Justin. We knew a lot of these guys, and then
I wouldn't have. I would have been happy covering it from the standpoint of we know the players, but I wouldn't have been happy if this was the exact draft.
Jaden Crumedy and then Michael Barrett in the 6th and 7th round. That is the other part of why I'm low on the Panthers is I just don't like the players that they get with their draft picks, right?
Yeah.
Like I think I don't think Jonathan Brooks even healthy is a clear-cut second round back, and he's coming off of a torn ACL. Xavier Legette, I like him, but there's like very big boomer bust potential there with him. Trevin Wallace, a guy who needs
trade space.
Yeah, trade space. Jatavion Sanders, another guy who is one of these tight ends you fall in love with, and can be something, but it's like, does he though? Does he?
I like Jatavion Sanders. Jatavion Sanders in round 4. I like that value.
Yeah, that's a good value pick. But if you ask me, does Jatavion Sanders become one of the better tight ends in the NFL? Yes or no? I would say no. And then you think about his negatives as a blocking, and I don't think he's ever going to be one of those better guys in the NFL. And then you bring him as a negative as a blocker. Chao Smith-Wade and the 5th through 7th picks.
I like him, but I like Chao Smith.
Yeah, I like Chao Smith-Wade too. But their first 4 picks, I just would have strongly went in different directions. Not the Jatavion Sanders. Like you said, 4th round Jatavion Sanders, that's a good swing right there. But the first 3 picks I would have went in different directions. Yeah,
especially Jonathan Brooks, man. Like it's just there's so many holes on this Carolina Panther team, and you're going to fill it with and even 2024 is a big season for them. I understand Miles Sanders kind of stinks and Chuba Hubbard's just a run-of-the-mill kind of running back. And it's okay, we'll invest in the running back room for years to come, but I don't know, man. If there's so many other holes, there's so many other ways that you could have gone with that pick 46. I was salivating at the idea. Like I wanted my favorite team to have that kind of early second round pick, and feel like they kind of blew it. And Xavier Legette, a 5th-year senior at a skill position that only broke out during his final year as a 22-year-old senior. I don't know, man. Like I don't know if that kind of stuff is going to translate to the NFL. 37% of his receptions came on curls and screens, by the way. Limited route tree at South Carolina. So I don't know, man. I don't love it. But also I kind of want to give Dan Morgan a little bit of a break, because when you're kind of thrusted into the GM role in the month of January and then February, you're rolling right into it. And then the draft is in April, when every other organization that has their GM is studying on this class and they have all their staff and their evals done. It's a tough spot to be in for sure, but that doesn't change the fact that this draft class is a little underwhelming.
And here's the most negative thing for the Carolina Panthers, which we probably won't bring this roll up besides maybe the Dallas Cowboys in these episodes. Dave Tepper's the worst owner in the NFL. Like he's actively a pain. Like he's actively hurt them as being an owner, right? Like we talk about teams meddling or giving no, he legitimately meddles, right? When they fired Frank Reich last year, his press conferences was one of the most bizarre ones I've ever seen. forget about the throwing the beer on people or going to random restaurants and taking people's hats. Like they have the worst owner in football, and that's just as a fan, that's just a bad feeling. That is like
Yeah.
even if there's bright spots, I just are we going to have the continuity to make this successful long term and crawl out of where we are right now? So their over under is 5.5 wins, over or under.
I found 4.5, which I honestly had a lot more trouble finding the over under than I thought I would. If it's 5.5, I'm going under, and even 4.5, I would say under.
Yeah, I
Because they
have
won
them
two.
at. I filled out an entire schedule. I had them at 4-13.
Yeah, they won 2 games last year. Are we really going to sit here and argue that they're going to win double the amount of games this year? I think they could win
I
more.
think they will win double the amount of games. I think they'll win 4.
Okay, but I'm still going 5.5. I'm going under, and then even 4.5. I'm going under.
Yeah.
I'll side with 4.
Yeah, so I am going under as well. All right, that is your 2024 Carolina Panthers, and that is football today.